You're listening to the Already Cancelled podcast.
I got a bad feeling about this.
We have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out.
Slap some bacon on a biscuit and let's go.
Let's put a smile on that face.
These allegations are false.
What's your profanity?
Do I look like I know what a JPEG is?
What is up, chicken nuggets, and welcome to the Already Cancelled podcast, where we rant about social issues from our Christian perspective and look deep at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. My name is John, and I'm joined today by my esteemed co-host, Nathan.
Hello. How are you, John?
I am doing very well. How about you?
Good. So today we're going to discuss a little bit about some past events. We're going to talk about first the Supreme Court. We mentioned that there was going to be an appointment in our last episode, and we were not sure what that appointment would be. So we now know.
Donald J. Trump appointed, words today, Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court.
Now, quick question. Does an appointment mean she's automatically confirmed?
Hang on. I think we discussed this last time. Yes.
No. The answer is no.
Oh,
it first has to be confirmed by goodness, by the Senate. The House of Representatives has no proceedings in the appointment and confirmation of a Supreme Court justice.
But Nathan, that doesn't seem fair.
Well, I hate to break it to you, but it's the checks and balances that we have in place. I mean, it's just is the way it is. It's how it's set up.
You're right, and it's all established within our Constitution. The founders, set this up, and so it's like you said, it's a balance of power, and it's really important. And I think it's something that our government has kind of lost. I think some of our politicians have kind of lost the true meaning of it, and they want to be able to do it all, and they think that if they don't get their way, they should be able to stop, the other party from doing what they want. And
so, with that in mind, we have something here that has definitely upped the game for the presidential election, like we discussed in the last episode. And Trump appointed, appointed Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court justice seat that was formerly filled by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She is a Catholic woman. She's not very old.
She would be, I believe, the youngest person. Citation needed on this, but the youngest person ever appointed to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know anything as far as the details to that.
She's in her 40s, maybe.
She's not very young. I don't have an age in front of me. But we're going to talk about what her stances are on some of the hot button issues of the day, and then we're going to delve into the presidential debates and how that influenced the first presidential debate.
It turns out she's 48 years old.
Oh,
so if she was appointed to the Supreme Court, she would have easily another 20 to 30 years. Yeah. And that's really what makes this election so important is it's, whoever gets this nominee, which, of course, right now is Donald Trump. He's not only, going to have, even if he loses the election, a 4 or 8 year impact. And a nominee like Amy Coney Barrett could, leave an impact for the next, 2 generations. And so I think that's really important. I think it's a big issue. And personally, I think she seems like a very good candidate. I haven't, dug into her record a whole lot. But from everything that I've seen and I've read, she seems like a very clean, upstanding person. She's a family woman. She... I believe she has at least a adopted child, if not 2. She has a great family. Very, very, lovely lady. And I think I hope her nomination goes through this week through the Senate Judiciary Committee. As we mentioned, that starts as of recording tomorrow on Monday, October 12th.
Yeah.
And we'll see what the Democrats throw at her, what they try to pin her with. It's going to be a narrow line to walk for them to try to discredit her, but also not, stir up Republican voters to,
Well, and what this does is it gives Trump in my opinion, a leg up, because what it does is it spurs those conservative voters who are a little more tentative about voting for the man to vote for the man because they strongly believe the Supreme Court should be conservative. And it is interesting to note that despite a majority of Supreme Court picks over the last 42 years, Conservatives have never succeeded in building a durable and reliable majority. That's 42 years. And that's why it's putting Democrats into a tailspin, because what it would do is it would actually create a conservative court.
That would be a 6-3 balance of 6 quote-unquote conservative judges and 3 liberal judges.
Well, and let's define the difference between a conservative and a liberal judge. And sometimes they flip sides. So like Chief Justice Roberts, he's not a conservative a conservative-minded judge. He just isn't, okay? And the reason I say that is because a conservative-minded judge, realistically, it's ridiculous to say they're conservative, because what they are is they're literalists. So what does the Constitution say literally? What was the Founding Fathers' intent when they wrote it? And that's how they judge and rule on laws, okay? The problem is you have activist judges, which is the term for it, which is where they interpret a law based off of what they want it to mean, and at that point, then they legislate from the bench. They create a ruling that has nothing to do with the actual content of the Constitution. It has everything to do with what they think it should be. Okay, and there are some issues that we could delve into that later in future podcasts as to specific court cases that should have been states' rights issues, but ended up being federal issues because the Supreme Court, in essence, legislated from the bench.
The biggest one of those, probably Roe v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade, and you could also say the court case regarding marriage.
Yes.
The institution of marriage. So we then delve into what is Amy Coney Barrett's stance on the hot button issue. So we'll start with gun rights, Second Amendment. Of course, it's a big one. And she actually is, she wrote a dissent in a case that upheld a Wisconsin law taking away gun rights from nonviolent offenders. So she was actually in favor of nonviolent offenders having guns.
So she's upholding their constitutional rights, even despite the fact that they're a felon, and therefore that means they no longer have human rights. Sorry, you guys, I'm doing air quotes around everything. And I think that's something we can, discuss more as well. But committing a crime doesn't automatically strip you of your human rights, and it shouldn't always strip you of your constitutional rights. Now, I think to some extent there are some crimes that, you don't really need to have a gun anymore if, you've assaulted people and you've threatened, a police officer with a weapon. Like, maybe you don't need that.
Well, and she took issue with the word dangerous. So the definition of what is a dangerous person, right? If they're a non-violent offender, what is your definition of danger, right? So what would justify taking away their gun rights? And she goes on to say that in the law that was written, the one that took away the gun rights, she said, treats the Second Amendment as a second-class right, subject to an entirely different body of rules other than the Bill of Rights guarantees. So basically, she's just saying, I'm looking at the Bill of Rights and going with that. We also have an issue. She talks about how she is in favor, or actually disagrees with abortion, but it's not real clear on that. And because she basically said the Supreme Court does not have any ruling to say that it's legal to abort someone based on their sex, race, or potential disability of the fetus, of the baby. So her ruling was that's not right. The Supreme Court never made a ruling as far as that goes. So saying that you can, it was an Indiana law that banned abortions, and she actually voted in favor of that law because there should be no saying that, she was obviously
it's discrimination, against. I don't want to have a girl. I'm going to abort this child. Or a child with Down syndrome. How horrible. I don't want that. Or
the law was ruled as unconstitutional by the Seventh Circuit Court, and she wanted the court to re-examine the decision. So that's basically what her point is on there. And then when it also comes to immigration, for the most part, she sided with the Trump administration on that one. And then the death penalty is kind of interesting. And this is a quote from her. She says, judges cannot, nor should they try to, align our legal system with the church's moral teaching whenever the two diverge. Now, says, they should, however, conform their own behavior to the church's standard. Perhaps their good example will have some effect. Now, the other interesting thing is she says that in this article, and this is where we're pulling this from, it's an article called Catholic Judges in Capital Cases. But she actually says that to some extent, maybe a Catholic judge should recuse themselves or herself from a proceeding.
I think that's a great quote and a really interesting point. Just because like it's very self-aware to know like, hey, I have this bias, I have a predisposition towards one idea, and so therefore I cannot be totally just. I think that's very self-aware and something that a lot of us need more of. But I think that quote is interesting because that's something that I think a lot of people, especially on the left, are going to try to pin on her is, oh, she's a Catholic, we need a separation of church and state. Well, first of all, that's totally irrelevant. Everybody has a religion, whether they want to be Catholic or agnostic, or everybody has a viewpoint that they come from, a moral compass. And
I'd love to delve into that whole idea of separation of church and state at a future point, because realistically, that is not found word for word in the Constitution.
But either way, yeah, where I was going with that, they're going to try to say, oh, we need a separation of church and state, but she's saying that there should be. She is saying that we should not take our moral values and apply them to the courts, but she's saying that those moral fibers and those moral ideas should change who we are as people, and that stays with us even when we go into the court, when we make a better example.
And we may have to recuse ourselves.
But she's not judging from the Bible.
No, right.
And I think that's really important. I think that's a great quote that's going to be very relevant in the coming days during her nomination hearings.
And that actually brings us into how the first presidential debate between presidential candidate Joe Biden and President Donald J. Trump was just a couple days ago, a week or two ago. And what happened was that was a big ticket question. So it was Supreme Court, and Biden argued in that the election plays into nominating a Supreme Court justice. He basically argued that you're only president, in theory, for 3.5 years. And the year you're running for office, when someone's running against you, you should not appoint a judge. Well, first off, the argument is utterly ridiculous because a president is afforded a 4-year term. 4 years.
4 years. They stay president until the inauguration in January. Is it a specific day in January? Or it's just
it is a specific day. I'm not sure what it is, but
is it always?
It's 20-something.
Like 21st. Whatever. Who cares? You're president up until that day. And just because you have lost an election does not mean that the time from November to January is just free time. Like, that's still your presidency. You still have work to get done. The world does not stop just because you lose an election.
Right, and it's actually called a lame duck session because realistically nothing gets done in Congress at that point in time because if another president was to win, a presidential candidate was to win, basically nothing's going to go happen because they're just going to wait. So, but he still has to run the country. He still has to operate the military. He still has to do his constitutional duties. And one of the constitutional duties of the president is to appoint a Supreme Court justice. It does not guarantee they will be appointed to the Supreme Court.
Exactly. And we discussed this last time a bit, that, again, it's the president's job, it's his duty to make that nomination, whether the Senate decides to, support that and or table it or ignore it. That's up to the Senate, and that's up to whoever voted, and what if the Senate majority. That's up to them because the people have spoken and made a voice through those people and through those senators. So it's up to the Senate. It's not really the president's job not to appoint a Supreme Court nominee just because it's an election year.
And we're now going to delve into a little bit on the debate. So it was Chris Wallace was the moderator, and the debate, what are your thoughts in 30 seconds as to what you thought about the debate? And I'll give mine.
30 seconds. Okay. The first word that comes to mind when I think about the presidential debate from about 2 weeks ago now is disappointing.
Yeah.
Like I had great expectations going into it, and really it was not great. I think both sides had their shortcomings, or I should say all three sides had their shortcomings. That is Trump, Biden, and Chris Wallace as the moderator. I think Trump didn't do himself any services, talking over Joe Biden and interrupting and being his normal Trumpian self. I think Joe Biden played to the camera and to the audience as a politician of 47 years. He knows how to do that, and he knows how to do that well. but he didn't answer any of the questions. It was all an appeal to emotion. It was a joke. I think Chris Wallace was, I wouldn't say super biased, but he was not an unbiased moderator by any means. And I think some of his questions were pretty stupid. And I know we'll get into that later, but...
And I would agree with you on that. And we're going to delve into some of the quotes here from Trump and Biden and Chris Wallace as to how that worked. And my thoughts on the debate basically completely align with yours. I do not think the president did himself any favors. I think there were some good zingers in there, but they were overshadowed by the constant interrupting, and the constant comments by Biden. I mean, Trump made points, but the problem is the points sounded like comments, whereas Biden a lot of times was just saying, would you just shut up, and things like that were just demeaning, okay? And overall, the debate itself did, and I agree with many news agencies on this, saying that it did not change anyone's opinion. Those who are going to vote for Trump are going to vote for Trump. Those who are going to vote for Biden are going to vote for Biden. And independents...
The few independents that are left are probably just like, what the heck have we gotten ourselves into?
And to some degree, I agree with him on that.
I do want to say one quick other note about Joe Biden. I was impressed with his showing. I think he did very well for himself. I know we both expected him to fumble a lot more and to not be very coherent and cognizant, but he did very well. And I don't really want to like delve into the conspiracies around that, you know, whether he had a wire in his ear, whether he was on drugs. I'll just say that he made a better showing than we expected and than what we've normally seen from him, and good for him.
It was impressive. I will give you that. But you have to remember the bar for Trump was really high. The bar for Biden was pretty low. So.
Well, we also need to remember that there's also a precedent for incumbent presidents, that is, presidents who are running for re-election, usually in the first presidential debate, do pretty poorly.
Yeah, that is true.
Obama bombed his first debate against, what was it, Mitt Romney?
Mm-hmm.
It's normal because they've been a president. They haven't been really, prepping for the debate. They come in thinking, I got this. And then they bomb and they realize, I need to get my act together.
Well, and coronavirus has thrown a monkey wrench into everything, and we'll get into that later. But along those lines, though, Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act came up. And Trump administration and 18 states' attorney generals are seeking to overturn Obamacare. And this is from Chris Wallace. If I may ask you that question, sir, over the last 4 years, you have promised to repeal and replace Obamacare, but you have never in these 4 years come up with a comprehensive plan to replace Obamacare. Trump stated, of course I have. And then he goes on to say he eliminated the individual mandate. And then Chris Wallace came in and said this: I am the moderator of this debate. No duh. And I would like to, he didn't say that portion, but he said, and I would like to let me ask my questions, and then you can answer. And he continues with his question, which was, you, in the course of these 4 years, have never come up with a comprehensive plan to replace Obamacare, and just this last Thursday, you signed a largely symbolic executive order to protect people with pre-existing conditions 5 days before this debate. So, my question, sir, is, what is the Trump healthcare plan? Well, first off, okay, he already had asked the question to, and then he goes in to say, excuse me, pardon me, I haven't finished, and then rewords his question again, and then says, oh, so you just signed that executive order, which in Chris Wallace's understanding is largely symbolic, okay, whether it is or not, it is an executive order and is binding by law until overturned by another president, okay? And how it works, I don't know. I didn't delve into the specifics of the executive order or how they're going to handle it as an agency. But he then goes into, what is your healthcare plan? Okay, first off, how in the sandhills is he going to explain a healthcare plan in the 2 minutes he's got to explain it?
The other thing I'd like to just, I think my biggest takeaway from this, and then the vice presidential debate, which I'm sure we'll discuss in the future, is just the questions are always so stupid, and maybe not always, but in this instance, it's, a 2 minute, preface to his question, which finally boils down to, what is the Trump healthcare plan? You could have just asked that. But again, to your point, you don't really explain a healthcare plan in 2 minutes.
Yeah. No. But maybe you could present it, okay, and I'm not against that. I do think, though, as far as Chris Wallace is concerned, asking a question versus stating an opinion then asking a question creates a bias. The question had a bias around it, and that's the problem.
And that's an issue that we'll see over and over again in some of these questions in both of these debates, is just a preconceived bias and logical fallacies.
Or even an opinion. And Trump then responded to Chris Wallace, and this is one of the zingers. He said, well, first of all, I guess I'm debating you, not him, but that's okay. I'm not surprised. Let me just tell you something. And he says that has nothing symbolic. So he's saying my executive order is binding. He's saying that's not just symbolic. So his wording, Trump's wording sometimes can be a little bit like small words and a lot of just kind of guesswork. Yeah. And then, of course, after that, Chris Wallace says, Mr. President, you'll be happy. Okay, the snarky, first of all, not needed. And then he says, I'm about to pick up on one of your points to ask the vice president, which is he points out, which is strange wording, that you would like to add a public option to Obamacare, and the argument that he makes and other Republicans make is that it's going to end private insurance. So he kind of addressing the president, then he turned to Joe Biden and asked the question. And
I know there was some outlash or outcry about that was because, he shouldn't be asking questions that the president's going to like. It's like he's just making like a kind of trying to transition a little bit, and hopefully, I think he was trying to appease the president as well, because he could tell like there wasn't a lot of grace and a good demeanor between the two of them, and so
but to say, Mr. President, you'll be happy, that's a little condescending.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on the condescending when we watched it, but I know other people like, he's that's biased towards the president. No, it's not.
Well, and I give Chris Wallace credit for this question, because Biden then responded to that saying. The question was, are you going to end private health insurance, basically? And Biden says, it is not, period. And then Wallace responded directly, I am asking the question, which, okay, he did rebut Biden there. He says that it will end private insurance and create a government takeover of healthcare. And basically, that's the problem, I think, with this. It was the moderator stating a fact. And while it may have been true, technically, we're supposed to discuss policy, and sadly, in this day and age, the moderator here is discussing the policy, and the candidates are just denying each other.
There wasn't much policy discussed during that debate. There wasn't a lot of question answering, I think, especially when it comes to the Supreme Court.
Well, and one of the biggest thing was the packing of the Supreme Court, like you mentioned, and Biden's response to that question by the president, okay, because I don't think Chris Wallace really delved into that.
Chris Wallace didn't really push him on it.
Which the sad part is that is probably one of the biggest things with this election, and Chris Wallace just kind of, we're going to ask, and kind of not. And then, so Biden's response was pitiful. This is what he said. Whatever position I take on that, that'll become the issue. The issue is the American people should speak, and you should go out and vote. We're in voting now. Vote and let your senators know how strongly you feel. Vote now. In fact, let people know it's your senators. I'm not going to answer the question. And Trump said, why won't you answer the question? And Biden then returned to the man and said, and this is all paraphrase, okay, but this is actual quote. He said, would you shut up, man? And Trump then responded with, and kept his cool to some extent, and said, who's on your list? And then Wallace comes in and butts in and says, we have ended this segment. We're going to move on to the second segment.
And Joe Biden comes in and says, that was a really productive segment, wasn't it? It was an absolute mess because...
And then he turns to Trump and says, keep yapping, man.
The issue was, we were talking about packing the Supreme Court and the idea that if the Democrats were to win the election, would they try to pack the Supreme Court? That is, would they try to pass legislation that would allow for more judges to be added to the Supreme Court, thus making the, what would then be 6 conservative judges, null and void because, now there's 28 judges on the Supreme Court and we've just, nominated, 15 liberal judges to the Supreme Court, and therefore it doesn't really matter. That's the idea of packing the Supreme Court.
Well, and we've mentioned that it's been 42 years since it's been a consistently conservative majority. Okay, so there is a time when things flip. It happens in politics. We've had to live with left policies and leftist ideologies in the Supreme Court for years now. Now, it's been somewhat balanced, but, not really. So this just is the flip of the coin, just like President Trump winning the election flipped the coin.
And the thing that Trump ended up trying to press Joe on was who's on your list? Who's on your list of president or Supreme Court nominees? Because if you remember, a few weeks ago, before Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, even before that, President Trump had set out a list of potential Supreme Court nominees. He had a huge list of those, and Joe Biden had crickets.
Yeah.
Like, there was nothing from the Joe Biden camp. And so that's what Trump was pushing into was, hey, who would you even nominate? Like, and Joe, like you said, Joe Biden refused to answer. He said, I'm not going to answer this because whatever answer I give will become the media talking point.
Well, and he, yeah, exactly.
That's kind of the point.
Yeah. It's like maybe you should be clear on something that is so critically important to the nation, okay, as a whole, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, to say, well, when I discuss this, it'll be the issue.
Yeah, everything you discuss, when it comes to policy, should be the issue. That's what we're voting on. We're voting on issues. We're not voting on you because you're a nice guy, Joe Biden. We're not voting on you because you've been around for 47 years and we think you'll get the job done.
Come on, man.
We're voting because we care about how you will stand on certain issues. And when you won't talk about the issues, it's an absolute joke.
Well, and it does go down to, when Trump pushed him on the Green New Deal, Biden's basic response was, we don't support the Green New Deal. We have the Biden plan. But on their own website, it mentions the framework of the Green New Deal is a great thing for the Biden plan.
If I'm not wrong, Kamala Harris co-wrote the Green New Deal.
Well,
or co-signed anyway.
Well, she was the co-sponsor of it in the Senate side. So it was originally AOC, Ocasio-Cortez, who wrote the bill with several other representatives, and then Kamala was one of the very few senators who voted yes on it, but she was also one of the co-sponsors of it in the Senate. She brought it to the Senate, the same exact bill. And
so, therefore, while Joe Biden doesn't support it, Kamala Harris apparently does. And so that's the other issue with the Democratic Party right now, is they don't even know what they stand for. Joe Biden came out at the beginning of the debate and said, I am the Democratic Party.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot about that until he is the Democratic Party.
I'm sorry, Joe. You are the puppet of the Democratic Party.
The Democratic Party also has to go to bed at 8:30.
Yeah. And stay in his basement. But realistically, it boils down, and in all seriousness, to say, oh, I don't support it, but yet on your website you say it's a great framework. You're lying. Joe, you're lying.
You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier.
Right. As in your own words.
In his own words.
Yeah,
he's a lying dog-faced pony soldier.
Whatever that may mean. But that's the sad part is I feel like the Democratic Party is doing a great job of avoiding questions and not answering questions and saying, we're of course for the generic issue. We're of course for the generic topic. And they won't get down into the policy. What do these things cost? And realistically, what they're trying to do is turn the country to a socialist agenda of government control. The Green New Deal, and this comes from several articles I can't cite exactly. You could look it up if you need to. But the Green New Deal on average would cost the American household $600,000.
Yikes.
I'm sorry. There's no way I could afford that. No way. And their idea of, the government will pay for it. Where does the government get its money? It doesn't just print it it doesn't grow on trees.
Well, funny thing you say that. Our money is a paper product. It's not exactly paper. Our money is actually very interesting, but that's beside the point. Our money is made out of paper, which is made out of trees. So technically it does grow on trees, but your point is the American government does not just have money. They can't just print money. All the money that the government has comes from its own people.
Right.
That's the process of taxation, and it's obnoxious. We all hate our taxes. We hate, we get that paycheck and it's missing, a couple $100 because it all went back to taxes. But that's the way that the country was formed so that we could, invest in the nation. The nation is run and ruled by us. And so the real thing is taxation without representation. We have the choice. We get to be represented because we have the voting process that is so absolutely unique. Before the United States was formed, this was never heard of.
Well, and it really boils down to, when you were mentioning taxes and without representation, we have representation right now because Joe Biden has explicitly said he's going to get rid of the Trump tax cuts. Now, he can't do it alone. He needs the House and the Senate to go through with that. But let's face it, okay? he says he wants to get rid of the Trump tax cuts, and he has told people on the campaign trail, I'm going to increase your taxes. Now, he's prefaced that with he's only going to increase taxes on people make X dollars or more.
I think the numbers like people who make over $600,000 or more,
Right.
which is such a weird number. Like if
Well, you pull that out of a hat? I mean, really.
like if I'm making $200,000, like that's fine. But if I make $600,000 and that's too much, like
It's a problem. And then Trump then said, so you're for increasing taxes. And Joe Biden says, well, not exactly. Well, yes. The answer is yes.
I think when it comes down to it, the whole thing that the Democratic Party is trying to pull, like you mentioned, they won't stand up on any issues. And that's because the Democratic platform in this election is I'm not Trump. Right. That's the only thing they're willing to do and stand up for is to not be Trump. Because any other stances that they take, whether they're going to raise taxes or lower taxes, whether they're going to pack the court or not pack the court, whether they support the Green New Deal or whether they don't support the Green New Deal, that's going to divide their voting base because all their voting base can actually unify on is hating Trump. Otherwise, you have these radical left ideas and some more moderate, middle-of-the-road Democrats, and if they can't all unify under hating Trump, then they can't get those voters to work together.
Well, and then we'll touch on that, the radical left. So he says one of the zingers that Trump had was, oh, really? Who do you have? Name one group that supports you. Name one group that came out and supported you. Go ahead. Like, we have time. And he was saying, we have time. We're on law enforcement. And Biden's response was, we don't have time to do anything. And then Chris Wallace came in and saved the day.
Well, of course, Joe Biden doesn't have time to do anything. But
well, and Chris Wallace then, this is an hour and 1 minute into the debate, then said, gentlemen, I'm going to take back control. So he didn't allow Biden to answer the question of does he have law enforcement, endorsements. And he couldn't think of any on the spot, which is saying something. But then along those lines of law enforcement and the unrest in this country that's going on, Wallace then asked the same question he asked in the 2016 debate was, do you condemn white supremacy? Now, I believe this was a softball question. While it was really ridiculous, had nothing to do with policy.
To clarify, he asked Donald Trump if he condemned white supremacy.
Sorry, I should clarify that. And back in 2016, Donald Trump said, yes, I condemn white supremacy. He said it in the White House. He said it on the campaign trail.
He's condemned white supremacy left, right, and center. And even just a matter of weeks ago, before the debate, Donald Trump, in the same breath, condemned the KKK and Antifa.
Well, he called them terrorist organizations, which then changes the way the FBI can investigate them and stuff.
So to question whether the fact that Donald Trump is a white supremacist is absolutely absurd. But like you mentioned, Chris Wallace asked the exact same question 4 years ago. Yeah.
And so he's asking it again. Now, it's a softball question. Realistically, the president should have responded with, yes, I condemn white supremacy. But instead, he goes, well, name one group. It's like,
Unfortunately, yeah, that was a big miss for Donald Trump. He could have just knocked that out of the park, but he just didn't get the words out. He said sure a couple of times. Sure, I condemn.
And that was his way of saying yes, but it wasn't.
He didn't state what needed to be stated, and so of course the media is all over that. They hate him for it. They think he's a white supremacist. Even when he does condemn white supremacy, they still think he is. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Well, and it really went down to then Biden said, well, the Proud Boys. Well, I mean, Trump then said a day later, he goes, I don't even know who the Proud Boys are, but he told him to stand off and stand down, something like that?
Stand off and stand by.
Stand back and stand by or something. Well, and the problem with that whole segment is it didn't condemn anything. It didn't mean anything. And he got roasted for that. And realistically, it was a softball question. It was dumb, but it was a question, and he didn't answer very well.
Of course, then they turned it on Joe Biden a little bit, and there was some questions about, do you condemn Antifa? And he said, Antifa doesn't even exist.
He says it's a thing of our imagination or whatever. It's it's an idea. That's what his thing is.
It's an idea. So an idea is burning down cities throughout America.
Yeah,
sure.
Whatever, Joe.
What? Whatever, Joe.
And then
come on, man.
Yeah, really. But one of the biggest topics was coronavirus and Trump's handling and Biden's handling of the COVID situation.
And I think that's going to be the real deciding factor for Trump's reelection is the coronavirus. Because up until January, he had this in the bag. He had, the best economy this nation's ever seen, which of course is just a carryover from the Obama administration.
Oh, of course. Well, when Obama says that, what are you going to wave a magic wand to bring manufacturing back? It obviously wasn't Obama.
Yeah, it was a mess. I think coronavirus is going to be the biggest issue during this election. That's the thing that the Democrats keep coming back to. They keep trying to blame Trump for it. They keep trying to blame Trump for mishandling it, for causing all of the deaths, because 200,000 deaths due to coronavirus is Trump's fault specifically.
Well, and of course now he banned travel from China, and at the time Joe Biden said that's homophobic, you're racist, and all that jazz. And
Wait.
yet now he's saying you didn't do it early enough. So what you can't. What is it like? Have your cake and eat it too.
Hindsight is 20/20. We can all look back now on January, February, March, and say, "Oh man, if only we had done this." But when we were in that situation, we had no clue what was going on.
Well, and there's a reason it's called a novel coronavirus, is because it's novel means new. We don't really know exactly how to handle it. And Trump did do a good job of pointing out the mistakes that the Biden team did handling the H1N1 swine flu situation. And only 14,000 people died, but there was a lot of people infected with that. And if it had been as deadly, Biden's, I think it was like chief of staff or somebody within the Biden group that handled that, came out and said, it's a miracle, basically. It was not deadly, or as deadly as coronavirus, because he said we did everything wrong. That was Joe Biden who handled that situation firsthand, and one of his upper guys said we did everything wrong. Okay, so Biden, you say, that you could handle the coronavirus situation better. Say why? Well, he never answered that question. He said he wants a national mask mandate, but I mean, other than that, they really haven't laid out much of a plan. Kamala Harris, in the vice presidential debate, did lay out a little bit of a plan, but it sounded vaguely familiar to what Donald Trump has already done. Yeah.
So we'll look into that a little bit more too. But
and after that debate, there was a Gold Star event at the White House, and basically someone came in with coronavirus, even though they're all tested heavily. And then the president got it, the press secretary has gotten it, the first lady's gotten it, and several others.
Yeah. So there was a huge super spreader event. There was like 34 cases.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure that's high and for something like that, and it's not great. But I don't think that really classifies as a super spreader event. However, like you said, President Trump did come down with coronavirus. The media had a total freak out. He ended up going to Walter Reed Hospital for 2-3 days.
Yeah.
Then he came back. He said he was feeling better than ever, and
he's been released now.
He's just recently been cleared to do public events again.
Yep.
And so, I think that was a really very interesting point. I think it really sorted out the wheat from the chaff, as we saw a lot of people online spewing a lot of hate about the president. Quite a few people wishing he would die, which, whether you love or hate a person, wishing that the president of the United States would die is
wrong.
It's
just wrong. Wishing anyone would die is wrong. Now, the interesting portion about that is, and this is what I find fascinating, is that this now gives the president, and while I wish he didn't get coronavirus, I don't wish that on anybody, he did get it. And the interesting thing about that is, because he's gotten it, he can now say, I've experienced this. He can speak from a platform of understanding now.
It almost gives him more ammo, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because
I don't think it was on purpose, but...
No, I don't think it was on purpose either. But he's experienced it. He knows firsthand, and he said that he was able to learn even more about the virus, during his, few days at the hospital than he has, all the days leading up to it. And so I think it was, like you said, while I wouldn't wish the virus on anyone, especially of his age, I think it was a very, profitable experience. And I think that really turns out to how God can take something that Satan uses for evil or intends for evil, and God will twist that and use it for good. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what happened in this instance, but I think it's a great example. No, you know what? I will say that that's what God did through this, that God used this instance of, the president of the United States coming down with, the biggest virus of the decade, that's killed over 200,000 people, and that God used that to help shape and change and grow Donald Trump. And so
well,
I
hope he has. The Democrats do a really good job of playing the empathy card when it comes to and we should be empathetic, of course, but that's not policy, okay? And now I do think, though, it should help the president understand and be a little more empathetic. Not that he hasn't been, but a little more than he has been empathetic towards those who have it or have had it, and towards the treatments that are coming out. And I mean, he stated we're going to have a vaccine after the election at some point, and then there's therapeutics being rushed out. But overall, the debate was not stellar.
It was not great from either side. We've said it all already. I think Chris Wallace was not great. I think Trump could have done better. I was impressed by Joe Biden, but he didn't really stand for anything.
I was impressed with his cognitive ability. I was not impressed with the comments he constantly made, and I was not impressed with when you tell the president, shut up, man, the president of the United States, that's not needed. It's just not needed. And let the president run, because he'll run himself into a wall. I mean, he will hurt himself. All the president had to do was let Joe speak, because the policies Joe has in place couldn't be any more different. I mean, couldn't be any more polar opposite different than the president's.
And even Joe has flip-flopped on his policies, depending on the day and what side of the bed he wakes up on.
Yeah, well,
I think the last big takeaway about all of this that we want to discuss is just there was supposed to be another presidential debate this week. I believe that was going to be on Thursday. However, it was announced late last week. I believe it was Thursday or Friday.
That would have been October 15th.
They announced that
for the one that was supposed to be scheduled.
The next presidential debate was going to be virtual. And immediately following that, President Trump said, nah, I'm not going to participate. And since then, both he and Joe Biden have scheduled different events for that day. And so there will be no second presidential debate. Now, my understanding was that was going to be a bit more of a town hall style.
Can you imagine a town hall Zoom meeting as a presidential debate? What in the world?
It's a joke. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if the third debate actually happens, if they try to make that one virtual as well. I was looking forward to it just to see,
town halls are a bit different dynamic.
And just to see how Trump performed.
He does better when he's talking with the people.
And I think, like we said before, there's a precedent for first time or for the first debate for an incumbent president to not go quite as well. So I was looking forward to see how he did in the second debate. But I think a virtual format, it doesn't work.
No.
And I think as far as Joe Biden, I think it would be great for Joe. He's been doing a lot of virtual stuff. And I hate to say it, but it allows for them to feed Joe answers and stuff more easily, behind the camera.
I would hope that they wouldn't do that. But,
I would hope that.